I'd like you to welcome our next speakers. We have Punit Ladd and Tom Oketch here to talk about applying product management thinking to internal developer-facing tools within organizations. Both Punit and Tom have a pretty diverse background. Punit joined us about 8 years ago from Canada, is now in North America. Tom also about 8 years ago from Uganda when we had the Uganda office, and then moved to North America as well. A similar story to a lot of the thought workers you've heard on stage today and will continue to hear. Globally diverse group of folks with a range of experience. They've both engaged in quality assurance. Punit has an application development background, and much more recently have been focused on infrastructure, which will be the focus of the talk today. So welcome to the stage, Punit and Tom.
Great. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Brandon. So as Brandon mentioned, my name is Punit. I'm a lead consultant at Thoughtworks. I've been here for 8+ years, and my preferred pronouns are he, him. So I've been a tech lead on various projects at Thoughtworks through application development into the infrastructure space. And yes, the last few years I've been focused primarily in the infrastructure space.
And my name is Tom Oketch. I am an infrastructure engineering lead and quality advocate. I've also been at Thoughtworks for more than 8 years. And right now, I'm really passionate about enabling teams develop a culture of collaboration, trust, and shared ownership of product and process.
So we're here to talk to you today about applying product thinking to internal infrastructure. But before we can do that, before we can dive deep into that area, we need to talk about what a product is. How do we define it? For most, a product is typically oriented towards some customer, allowing them to do something, create something, ask for something. So when it comes to building a product, the things we allow a product to do is effectively creating value for a customer. So if I go to Amazon, I can pick and choose what I want to buy. If I open up Photoshop, I can create designs and illustrations for myself. For me, the user of those two types of products, the abilities it allows creates value for myself. But traditional thinking around that product and the customer, we often orient ourselves towards the external customer, someone or something outside of the organization. Just like Amazon and Photoshop, when we typically build a product, the customer of the product that is built for is an external one. But what about internally? What if we're creating tools, services, infrastructure that exists within the organization? Most often, we don't think of them as products. We think of them as tools and tickets. But now, what if we didn't? What if we took internal infrastructure and we took the same approach that we do for external customers? What if we started thinking about that as a product instead?
So Max Griffiths, who is one of our colleagues in the UK, likes to remind us that infrastructure is all code now anyway. And if that's the case, then infrastructure teams may as well use the same proven practices that other agile product development teams already use. Now, through our experience previously on infrastructure teams and building infrastructure products, Punit and I have thought about this a lot. And we came up with the idea that there are essentially 3 principles that internal infrastructure teams should adopt in order to build products that solve their customers' needs with meaningful solutions that deliver both value and are delightful to use. And we're calling these tenets. The very first tenet we're calling clarity. And this is having a clear and well-defined problem and solution. So something which is really well understood. The second tenet, we're calling this customer. And this is about creating an experience that is oriented towards providing something that's valuable and great for your customers. So keeping your customer at the focus of everything that you're doing. And the third tenet, we're calling this currency. And this is a way to determine and track how your product creates measurable value for your customers and the organization.
So as Tom mentioned, that first tenet is to ensure a clear understanding of the problem and solution. So in order for us to eventually create a solution for internal infrastructure, we first need to define the problem at hand. we need to clearly identify it and understand it. So the problem has to also look at the customer. So let's talk about the customer. And which really means we need to understand and empathize with that customer. And when we're talking about customer in this aspect, we're talking about the organization's application development teams, people that are using internal infrastructure. So on one side of the spectrum, we see customers that are scared of infrastructure. You hear things like deployments are handled by the Jenkins team, or, oh, I just build the app, the infrastructure team creates the environments for us. Or I need to open up a ticket to create a virtual instance. It's very scary and a world you dare not step into. And if you do try to step into it, the learning curve is incredibly steep and just continues to go up. There's just so much to learn there, and I just can't imagine trying to figure out everything that happens in the infrastructure space. It just keeps going up. So you get this foreign domain that's incredibly scary, right? One does not simply just create infrastructure. I've been on projects like this, and for instance, one project that I was on as an application developer, the infrastructure part was its own special team. Because these were separated out, it created little to no incentive for us to improve in that area. And not only that, the application teams couldn't empathize with the infrastructure team or the other way around. There was always a wall and a fence between us. We always had to throw things over it. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's application teams that are incredibly excited to dive deep into this infrastructure area. They're deploying their app on Kubernetes with Istio, Prometheus, setting up logging with an Elk stack, and pipeline tools that check against code quality with a deployed instance of SonarQube. All the while, they're only trying to deploy a single API. These teams quickly realize that they've become overloaded with the number of technologies that they have to manage and maintain. They continue to forget what the team's original goal was, and they end up becoming one that spends more time managing and maintaining that infrastructure and less time on the application itself. I've been on this type of team before, and though it was fun to learn these things, we effectively had to manage so much of the stack, we didn't accomplish nearly as much as we thought we could. We were constantly battling the problems of the infrastructure space rather than trying to build the application and focus on that solution. So you then see these two ends of the spectrum. One where customers don't want to go into the infrastructure domain and have the scary thought of it, and the other where they're incredibly excited to play with all the amazing new toys, but don't realize the cognitive complexity that comes along with it. So now we understand the customer. We understand who we're going to be working with and what we're going to be thinking about when it comes to the problem and the solution. So how can this experience be better? How can we change this experience and make it better for our customers?
Well, think about what usually happens when we use successful commercial products, like say Circle CI or GitHub. If I need a pipeline, I create a pipeline in Circle CI, right? If an EC2 instance that I created in AWS does not work, then I go and debug it. I, the developer, go and do this thing. I want something, I go and do it. So essentially what is happening here is that the language is shifting from asking a team to do something or to provide a service to feeling empowered to do it yourself. I mean, you never think about opening a ticket to GitHub to create a repository, right? You just go ahead and create it yourself, right? So there is a distinct difference in the language that is being used when we talk about these products. Suddenly, it feels like the developer is in control. They don't have to wait on some opaque ticketing process to get their work done. They don't have to wait for multiple levels of approval before they can test a new feature. They just go ahead and test it. They don't have to sit by, twiddling their thumbs as Bob from security reviews their changes. No, they get to sit in the driving seat and are free to work on delivering value without unnecessary roadblocks. So yes, the developer is in control. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're not advocating for a wild, wild west experience that is filled with just chaos and havoc and anarchy, where anyone can do whatever they want at any time without, any accountability. We know that organizations have a real need to maintain certain standards around compliance, security, and quality. And we also know that the classical model for infrastructure teams, where everything is locked down and under centralized control, tends to work really well towards achieving these kinds of compliance objectives. So does this mean that we come to a dead end? No. What we're advocating for is an experience where the developers have the autonomy that they need, but they do not have to worry about meeting compliance objectives, not because they're not important, but because those are already baked into the product that they're using. So effectively, the developers should not have to think about all the underlying implementation of what they're creating or how it is compliant, because that's not a core concern for them. Punit has been mentioning, if you're a team that's building a pricing application, that should probably be your primary concern, right? So everything else that is adjacent to that is sort of built into the product. As someone famously said, we want to build a product that lets our customers effortlessly fall into the pit of success, not of despair. So, given everything we know about our customers and what they need, then we understand that the sweet spot is probably closer to the right than it is to the left, which is we're looking for a great balance of autonomy and baked-in compliance. So in this way, teams are not strained to take on full ownership of everything, including meeting objectives that are not adjacent to their own goals. But there is still a strong sense of them fully owning their entire stack. So we know the problem at this point. We have an idea for the solution. Now, how do we get there? How do we create this experience for our internal teams?
Well, first, we need a vision. We need a single point to understand the product vision and the principles. They are someone who has a deep, deep understanding of the customer, the experience that's going on, and what is to be created. They're someone that can see beyond the horizon and further into the future. They're seeing 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year down the line of what that vision and what that experience is going to look like. We say this because as a team starts to go and build that vision, it's very, very easy to diverge. Divergence will happen. But if you have a visionary, someone who knows and truly understands that end state, the goal, the experience, they can always get you back on track. Over time, we believe that vision does become co-owned, but it never goes fully away from that single point. Now, you may be thinking that this visionary is actually just a product manager. However, Tom and I don't believe so. Product thinking is not just for product managers.
Yeah, right, Punit. It can be tempting to assume that maintaining a strategic and holistic perspective on your product is only the responsibility of the product manager and other business leaders. But what we've actually found is that this product thinking mindset has to be built and reinforced within the entire team. Everyone needs to be involved. It's the entire collective, right? And you need to jealously guard that vision, right? So we do this by making sure that we don't cut any corners with technical product ownership. Now, Punit and I have been on multiple projects together, and we've seen success with a model where you have a tech lead and a product manager and a subject matter expert being at the forefront of the roadmap and just translating that vision into a roadmap and into eventually stories that the team can actually pick up. So the creation of this whole roadmap, the creation and the management of the product vision and that translation now becomes a collaborative experience where people are involved, people are actually bought in, people are committed to this vision, and they're working towards achieving it. Now, we apply the same principles around making sure that we have a roadmap that accurately reflects our vision and our customers' needs. And this is just making sure that we have a backlog of work that's regularly prioritized, and all these other features and all these other requests that might be coming in to the team, making sure that those are also appropriately filtered through the lens of the product vision and prioritized as necessary. So what does this look like in practice? Well, this means that in practice, you may have to say no to some feature requests because maybe they don't meet the product vision, right? It also means that only working on the most urgent thing is probably not the right thing to always do. You're going to need to have a more holistic view of what you're trying to deliver. Additionally, this close alignment provides empathy and perspective that's needed for successful product ownership and roadmap creation, and it provides the right support. So the people that you have in place that are safeguarding the vision, they are also there to support you when you're interacting with external stakeholders that may not necessarily be aligned with the vision, but they're looking to build off of it, and they're looking to have input into the product that you're building.
Setting up a product vision and technical product ownership helps lay a strong foundation for a great product experience. And the experience we want to create is one where the developer feels in full control of the product they're using. Ironically, if we're doing a great job, our customers should never really talk about us. Invisibility is something that comes to mind there. Will Larson says in his book, when you're a bad infrastructure team, everybody knows it. People are complaining, and they can't get anything done. But good infrastructure teams are invisible. Good products never feel like they're doing something for you. We want to create an internal infrastructure product experience that feels invisible to the user. So how do we build a product that supports this type of experience?
So this brings us to the second tenet, which is the customer, and specifically a great customer experience. So for most infrastructure teams, the reality is that customers have no choice but to use whatever the team is building, despite the experience, whether that's great, whether that's terrible. But what if your customers had a choice? Like, what if they could choose to either use your product or not? Would they really use your product? This second tenet emphasizes that we need to consider the experience that our customers get when they're using our product, so that they're motivated to choose our product, even if they did not have, to use it. And what we're saying here is that we should not have to rely on enterprise mandates for our customers to adopt the products that we're building. Just because we're an internal infrastructure team doesn't mean that everyone has to use this one thing, despite the experience that they're getting. And this takes us back to what we just talked about earlier, which is we want to build something that our customers, the developers, inherently want to use. We want to build something that gives them that feeling that they are empowered and are in control. So if you recall back to when you're talking about some other external developer products, like say Circle CI or GitHub or AWS, the language that we're using, which is the developers are actually in control, right? That is the kind of experience that we want to be able to simulate. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing that we need to consider is that developers are smart. They are problem solvers. And for that reason, we don't believe in hand-holding developers. What this means in practice is that we should aim to build solutions that developers can pick and choose from to solve their own problems, kind of like Legos. So our products do not necessarily have to prescribe certain paths, but instead they provide useful tools and useful interfaces that developers can pick and choose from to get the right thing that meets their needs so they can solve their own problems. This takes us away from the trap of imagining every single possible scenario and attempting to build a golden path. Instead, we build modular pieces and then make those available to our customers so they can compose their own journeys, giving them the autonomy that they really, really, really love. Now, having said that, we do understand that there is a wide spectrum of developers who are at different points in their journeys. So some are going to really want to try out all these cool new things that we're providing, and some of them are going to be a little more reticent and they'll need more support in adopting the new technologies and the tools that we're building. So the product that we're building has to cater for these different customers that are at different points in their journeys. So we do this by making sure that the capabilities that we're building can be adopted by teams at varying paces. We don't want to essentially force everyone onto the same innovation cycle. For example, one of the things that we talk about a lot, Punit and I, is we do not want to force customers to use specific tools. We may encourage them to use certain tools, but we will not lock them out of alternatives. So if, for instance, a customer wants to use a certain tool for their CI/CD, they might be able to use that, and our product is going to be able to integrate with that experience so that we do not lock out anything that is familiar to them, but anything that they already can use, anything that they're already used to, they can already plug in and integrate into our ecosystem. At the end of the day, we really want our customers to feel like they own and control what is being created. Their experience should be painless and frictionless. Instead of having to, keep waiting around for a ticket to be completed and wondering, like, what is its status? What might have happened to it, right? We want developers to now have the sense and feeling that the wheels are constantly in motion. Things are rotating. Like, there is action every single time. And they are able to then focus on making changes that deliver value to their own customers. They do not have to wait on our team. They do not have to wait on our product. They can just go ahead and do whatever they need to do.
And so in order to create that, the ask there is actually more or less coming from the form of what are they allowed to do? What are our customers capable of doing? What capabilities do we want to provide to them? These capabilities the product helps to create the experience a user will have. And these capabilities map back to a journey that the customer will be taking. Remember, Tom said that these are like Legos, pieces that they can interchange and use. That journey isn't a golden path, isn't one path forward. We're providing different capabilities so that customers can take their own journey and have their own experience with using this. An example of such journey might be a customer wants to onboard themselves, would then query and display the environments that they need, and then deploy an application to one of those environments. Again, instead of the user thinking that the infrastructure is doing something for them, they are now empowered to perform the actions using capabilities provided by the internal infrastructure product. And the way that we can do this is through clearly defined interfaces. The goal here is to create a set of familiar interfaces that developers are used to. Things like CLIs, APIs, YAML files like going to Kubernetes. These are things that developers are used to. And recall, I didn't mention people. People are not interfaces. We're building our product in such a way that our customers do not have to talk to people to achieve these everyday tasks. Again, because people are not interfaces. We instead have clearly defined product interfaces with a clear documentation for discovery, onboarding, usage, and ongoing support. And those capabilities we mentioned, they're exposed through those interfaces that developers are familiar with, right? Those CLIs, APIs, Kubernetes interfaces, they ladder back into stuff that developers are familiar with. And if your internal infrastructure product is creating integrations into GitHub or Datadog or Argo CD or any of those are pre-existing interfaces that developers will already be familiar with. So don't reinvent those. We don't recommend it. And then those things will have existing documentation and community. So now, not only are you creating an experience internally, but you now allow folks to then go out to the rest of the community to gain knowledge. Go to Stack Overflow to find out how to use something on GitHub or Datadog. And look, this doesn't mean that we're against talking to people. That's not it at all. But people should not be the primary means in which your customers interact with your product. On that last point about clearly defined interfaces, one of the really important pieces is the documentation that you built into your custom interfaces. Instead, think of how that documentation makes its way into the product. We strive as much as possible to build products that are self-documenting, products that have guides to show you how to use it. And for any kind of documentation that's created, strive to ensure it's comprehensive and easy to read. It follows a consistent language. And because it's a product internally, it still has release notes, and they are automated, so they're easy to deal with for developers. And again, for those pre-existing interfaces like GitHub, Datadog, we encourage our customers to take advantage of their respective documentation, rather than us trying to recreate those. Those documentations that are created through those integrations, they're going to be much more mature than anything that our team could ever create.
That's right, Punit. And I hope you can see by now that what we're aiming to create through all of this is a self-service experience for our customers. We want our customers to be able to complete regular tasks without any interference from or dependence on our team. No experience with our products should involve opening a ticket or having to wait for extended periods to see the status of something. And our customers should effectively be in charge of what they build and deploy. So if they need something, they can go ahead and create it. So our designs keep in mind our customers' ability to self-manage what they create. And this provides the frictionless and invisible experience that Punit was just talking about, that our customers actually long for. Just as though they were using AWS or GitHub or any other external developer-oriented product. Now, we're both developers, so being part of building something that is for developers is very personal and relatable to us. As Punit says often, there is inherent beauty there. However, this is not always obvious to other stakeholders. When talking about external products, usually the value that is provided by the product is really straightforward. It's measured on the basis of things like revenue and profitability. But internal products, on the other hand, are typically seen as cost drivers as opposed to profit drivers. And this makes it tougher to correlate the value that's provided by those products to bottom line measures. So if that's the case, then how can we relate what we're building and the experience that we're providing with some form of value that is being provided? Well, this brings us to the third tenet, currency. And here we're not talking about just money and dollars and bills and things like that, but we're talking about a way of determining and measuring how your product creates value.
So how do we know that we're building something valuable and successful? We've already said that a fundamental characteristic of a product is that it provides value for its customers. To keep ourselves honest as developers of these products, we have to find a way to measure the value that our products are providing. Right? You can't improve what you don't measure. And a key to understanding this is the different layers at play here. Remember, we're an internal infrastructure product. So we don't deal with the external customer. We deal with the internal customer. So there are several layers at play here. So when we talk about those layers, we talk about three different layers. The value to the customer or the internal customer, the value to the customer's customers, and then the value to the organization. Knowing that these three layers exist helps you understand how to measure the value back and what success will mean for your internal product. Remember, an internal product doesn't have that simple success metric equating back to any sort of typical monetary increase. So when you have a good foundation of understanding these three layers of value, you can then understand what success means for it. And then it can help bridge that gap in the conversation when portraying it back to the organization. So when we think about the value towards our internal infrastructure customers, well, the main thing that we've seen is it comes in decreasing their cognitive load. So they don't have to worry about the cognitive complexity that is not relevant to the problems they're seeking to solve. Remember that pricing application team that had to take care of Kubernetes and Prometheus and SonarQube and all those different infrastructure things instead of being able to focus on their API? Well, now that we've created a tool and a product that allows them to no longer focus on those, they can solve the problems of the pricing API, pricing application. Right? They're, instead of solving 10, 15 different problems, they now can solve 2. This not only decreases a team's cognitive complexity, but it enables them to focus on delivering value to their customers. Let's not forget, though, that getting to this point of reduction in cognitive load takes time and takes feedback from your users. We are a product and we have customers. So a fundamental thing that we have to identify is that feedback loop with our users, with our customers. We need to collect feedback early and often. Some of the ways we do this as we're going through the development of this type of product is identifying alpha customers, right? There's a varying spectrum of customers on different journeys. And so we need to set appropriate expectations with them. So identifying those alpha customers, people and teams who are very eager to try out all these new types of products, we want them to come join us on our journey as well. And those customers are critical to adjusting and adapting. We've done this in the past by talking to teams to get a qualitative measure of their own experience on the products that we're building for them.
Thanks, Punit. And now, when looking at what is valuable from the perspective of our customers, which is the second layer, we find that it's almost always going to be about how relevant the product or service that they're getting is to both their current needs as well as any other emerging needs. So, for example, if the service that they're getting is buggy or does not change to meet market demand quickly enough, then they're probably going to abandon that service. So this puts the onus on our customers to be able to iterate quickly and then adapt to their customers' needs quickly. And they need to be able to reliably deliver changes without failures. They need to also be able to deliver frequent, stable releases so that they can meet their own customers' needs in a satisfactory manner. Now, as it turns out, these concerns that we're talking about are actually embodied in the 4 key metrics that I thoroughly talked about in the DevOps research report. The great thing about the product experience that we've been talking about is that it effectively enables our customers to own their 4 key metrics. What we're doing is we are providing our customers the tools and capabilities that they need in order to meet their own customers' needs in a timely manner and being able to do that reliably. And we're getting out of their way so that they can affect any of those metrics on their own. Now, the other great thing about this is that these 4 key metrics don't just enable our customers build products that are relevant to their own customers' needs, but ultimately they provide value to the organization itself by fostering high-performing teams. Now, Punit and I have read the DevOps research report countless times, and we know that in that report, improving on the 4 key metrics is the key to the success of not only the individual teams and the products that they're building, but also for the organizations themselves. So, quoting straight from that report, actually, it says that companies with engineering teams that did well against these 4 key metrics had higher rates of profitability, market share, and customer satisfaction. So we know that by empowering our customers to fully own their 4 key metrics, we can provide something that is of value across all the different layers. And lastly, providing a great internal customer experience also helps to solve a number of problems around talent acquisition and retention for an organization. The thing is, when we build products with an emphasis on providing a great developer experience, we end up with happier developers. And happier developers means those developers are more likely to stay and contribute back to the organization. And in turn, if everyone knows that working at such an organization is a delightful experience, they are more likely to want to be a part of that experience as well.
So a product succeeds when its customers succeed. This might mean supporting them early on in their builds and deployments, or ensuring their product releases are backed with strong internal infrastructure product support. As Tom and I say, our customer success is our success. We want to ensure that they're able to meet the needs for their customers so that we can then continue to meet the needs for our customers. Now, we know that this can sometimes be difficult to show within your organization. An internal infrastructure product may not meet the same needs that your organization wants. So lean on your customers to showcase the value of what your product is bringing. Again, their success is your success. So in closing, we want to remind you of those 3 tenets that we talked about earlier. Clarity, a well-defined problem and solution. Your product should create value for the customer. What you're building should be addressing that well-defined problem. And that problem, fall in love with it. Understand it deeply, because that's the thing that you're going to be solving. And then the customer. Work on having a great customer experience. Customers have a choice and they should not be mandated to use your product. So make every effort to make your customers fall in love with that product. And lastly, currency. Measure, learn, and adapt continuously. Continue to maintain a culture of continuous improvement. Learn from your customers, adapt with your customers, bring them into the fold of what you're doing, and take them on that journey, because that will help you build your product and make that better. We hope that you can build on the practices and experience that we've shared today and work to build better outcomes for your teams and yourself and your organization. From Tom and I, thank you so much.
Thank you.